record. So yes, hi everyone, just welcoming you all in. And what would be wonderful is if we all could find our chat box, including myself. So I'm just gonna, yeah, okay, all right, here's my chat, and just yeah, welcoming you all in and inviting you to find your chat. I would love to hear who's in the room with us on this live call and where you're tuning in from, because we've had team all over the UK sharing about these calls and this Women's Health Summit that we've been calling. So we'd love to hear, if you can find your chat button, to pop it in the chat, your name and where you're tuning in from, just so we can welcome you all in and get familiar. And I'm just gonna go through. And oh, hi, Amanda, my love. Is it sunny in Newton Abbot? My gosh, wow, amazing. Oh, yeah, it's a shame we're coming up really close to the eclipse portal, but it's not going to be visible from here in the UK. And Joe is eating spaghetti in Driffield, I think. Yeah, we're up north. So yes, welcome. It's lovely to hear where you're coming in from. And I can see that Nisha is here from sunny California. Hi, darling. Oh, and you're from Miami. Oh, wow, so Elsie's in Miami. So we've got two coming in from the US, which is amazing. Wokingham, Portsmouth. Oh, gorgeous. Well, it's good to know that the message is spreading far and wide because that's what we really wanted. So what I might do as well, I'm just going to try and make a couple of my lovely team here co-host, just in case I need any help with letting people into the room once we get started. But also I can normally keep an eye on both. Okie dokie. All right. And yes, Nisha coming in from sunny Palm Springs. Oh yeah, and you're going to have you'll be able to see the eclipse, Nisha. How exciting. Yay. Well, Nisha's going to go dark at in about 45 minutes. That's very exciting. Just mind your eyes, my love. Right. Oh, I just shut my chat. Okay, I'm gonna get started with this information because I have actually quite a lot to cover, as always. And just to give you a bit of a run before we get really into the call, just to say, hoping that the content should be for about the call should be about 35 to 40 minutes, and then what we're going to do is stop the recording, and I'm going to be able to stay on and just answer any questions. And we're doing that just mainly to kind of protect the privacy. You can ask questions in the chat throughout the call as well. I'm going to try and keep one eye on the chat, but if you feel like I've missed anything or you've got some deeper questions, do stay on, because once we stop the recording we'll be able to go a little bit deeper if you feel to. And just to say that that's going to be the case the whole way through with all of these seminars. We've actually got 6 seminars happening over the next 3 weeks to really deep dive into all these different aspects of women's health. So really excited to share all of this with you, and that's going to be the format. So you're going to have an opportunity each time, twice a week, to kind of come in and really ask direct questions as well. So welcome, my loves, to the Women's Health Summit. Just before we get into the topic for this evening, I wanted to kind of introduce the summit as a whole, because this is our first presentation, and wanted to just give you a bit of a synopsis really of who we are, what we're going to cover over the course of the 3 weeks, and why now. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Dot, and I live in beautiful South Devon in a town called Totnes. And I live here with my husband and our 2 children. And we have been customers of doTERRA since 2018. So it's just coming up to about 6 years since we first bought our oils. And I started my journey working with doTERRA in 2021. So coming up to sort of it's about 2.5, will be 3 years in the autumn. So in that time, our team has grown, and we're growing quite rapidly. It's very exciting, and we're welcoming in more and more people all the time, both to work with the oils and also to use the oils just as as happy customers. Some of the questions that we find come up again and again and again around women's health just came to a point where it felt so persistent and so important that we actually just addressed it in a more formal way. So the intention of the Women's Health Summit is really to look into some of the more like, I don't know, I guess the more like delicate aspects of women's health that maybe get overlooked or passed over in the conventional medical system. Of course, we love our NHS, we love having access to all of this incredible life-saving medicine, but what we have learned and come to understand is that actually so often women are underrepresented and kind of we can end up being overlooked in the medical system in so many ways, not just because we are often dismissed and our troubles written off as more sort of psychological than physical, but there's actually like a bigger disconnect with the medical system in that there's been there's been a sort of a long-term systemic breakdown of the knowledge and the trust around women's health because since the medical system was changed from taken away from more kind of orally passed down healers and wise women and kind of natural healing modalities with the dawn of a sort of more medicalized healthcare, then we really sort of lost that connection to the feminine wisdom that was passed down generationally. And also within that, there's actually been a huge gap in understanding women's health. So what we found out quite recently was that it's not new information, but basically most drugs, women aren't generally included in the clinical trials. So, and it's for a couple of reasons. Sometimes it's to do with the fact that because as women we're born with all of our eggs, and there's like a moral question. But then actually the other side of it is that women's hormones fluctuate throughout the month, and therefore we were considered too complicated to run drug trials on. And so quite often, most often, when a drug has been approved and meets the market, it hasn't been tested for safety on women. So actually, I've been reading this incredible book called Doing Harm, which talks about the gaps in sort of science and medicine that have left to these women, us as women, being really underrepresented in the medical studies, medical literature, and just how that is feeding into lots of different ways that women are being kind of underserved by the medical industry. So that is why we wanted to call the Women's Health Summit, because we see through our experience of working very face to face with women using natural tools that there's actually lots that we can do to support ourselves. And so much of it just starts with understanding. And it's not saying that anything else is good, bad, right, or wrong. There's a time and a place for everything. But what's so valuable is to have that knowledge and that understanding, to be able to lean into what's available in nature and holistically to try and support ourselves, especially in those instances when the medical system maybe isn't supporting us. So that was sort of why and what we want to cover over this Women's Health Summit. There's lots more information coming, and we'll share a bit more about that at the end. But for now, I want to dig into week one, our first seminar. And this is actually so foundational, I feel, and I'm really, really proud and honoured to be able to come on and share with you some information about the Map of Womanhood. So the Map of Womanhood is a sort of a set of principles, a guiding principle that I was brought to a few years ago by an amazing mentor called Eartha Love. And I will link to some of her resources and her website at the end of the program. But I couldn't start this presentation without first putting her in front of you all, because she's an incredible woman and she's really been my guide to come to understand the Map of Womanhood, which is something now that I've been working with for about 4 years. And I feel so grateful that this wisdom came into my life, and it really, for me, completely reframed my understanding of the female experience. And that's why it felt so important to start this process with you all by sharing about the Map of Womanhood, because it's something that, historically would have been handed down to us, this understanding and this way of perceiving our journey through life as women. And it's been lost in the past few generations. And Eartha's really passionate about rekindling the soul of the village and mending the soul of the village. And that all comes from kind of working with this beautiful understanding of our journey here as women. So I'm very excited to dig into it. And I suppose I want to start by kind of saying, well, how did we get here to this point where we haven't had this understanding. I think, for so many women, we have gone through our lives. I know this has certainly been my experience. I'm 40 now, and like I said, I came to this information like 4 years ago. And I feel lucky that I got it when I did, because I feel like so many women I know have gone their whole lives and never really understood this aspect of ourselves. But I want more and more women to know it. And I think so often we go through our lives and we can kind of have these phases as a woman where we literally feel like we're just at odds with the world. And sometimes we can feel almost like we're losing our minds. We can feel so out of alignment with the world at times. And that really comes from the fact that we are, as women, are cyclical beings. So we go through this beautiful 28-ish day cycle. If you have a healthy menstrual cycle, we should be rolling through that cycle as we move through our life each month. And over the course of a year, we should have our 13 healthy menstrual cycles. But we are living in this world that is linear. It's been sort of redesigned over time in a much more masculine linear way to always be like push, 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 and always moving forward. And actually for us women, we do need to learn to be in that ebb and flow. And we have really powerful phases of our cycle. And we also have phases where we need to withdraw a bit more. And so kind of learning about how we can work with those cycles can be such a powerful healing experience in and of itself. But it's just sort of important to honor that about ourselves and to understand there has been, over the course of the last, especially sort of 500-600 years, there's been a really systemic kind of assault on the feminine wisdom that would have been passed down through every generation up until that point. And so, when we look back in time around the 1500s, there were the witch trials, and there was also the sort of switch away from living by a lunar calendar to living by like mechanized time. So this was something that was actually brought in by the Vatican in the 1500s, all around the same time as the witch trials. And when we talk about the witch trials, fundamentally that was an attack on the birth workers and the doulas and the healers. And all of that wisdom that would have been passed down through oral and written traditions was destroyed. And then at the same time, up until that point in those mid-1500s, we would have been living by the sun and the moon and their movements tracking through the sky. And in the 1500s, there came the introduction of mechanized time. And many believe that this was the moment when truly our connection to nature and connection to that sort of natural wisdom was really severed. And for us as women particularly, there was a real disconnect, because up until that point we would have been very much feeling that ebb and flow of the moon in our own inner cycles, and living by that. And then with that switch to mechanized time, we suddenly went into this completely different linear time. And this was the point for many where we perceive this disconnect really started. And in that time, also then losing the village, losing the wisdom keepers, there's just been this really fundamental kind of severing of our connection to nature and our cyclical power that would have been sort of passed down through generations. And this is something I actually went on a very deep dive on, even around the number 13. So the number, because my daughter was born on the 13th of the month, and there's so much superstition around the number 13, but actually sort of our ancestors considered 13 to be a truly sacred number of the divine feminine, because in a healthy woman's cycle, we have 13 29-day cycles throughout the solar year. And so Friday the 13th would have been a very, very sacred day, because Friday is the goddess of Venus and 13 was the divine feminine. So Friday the 13th used to be this very, very special, very sacred feminine day. And then in this kind of weird process of this assault on the feminine that's happened over the past few hundred years, the number 13 has been deemed to be unlucky and sort of this negative number, especially when connected with the day of Friday. So it's really fascinating when you look at the way that culturally we've really actually embodied this kind of suspicion around the feminine and, a fear of the dark. And when really women, we are in the cycle of light and dark and birth and death every month when we're moving through our menstrual cycle. And even after we've experienced the sort of the end of our bleed and the end of our moon time, we are still cyclical beings, and we will still move through that light and dark spiral every month. And so it's really important that we start to reconnect to the positive aspects of that and begin to pass that on to the other female people that we, you know, the people in our community, the other females in our schools, in our communities, in our workplaces. It's so important that we start to redefine this as a positive experience for women. Um, and yeah, I think, oh yes, so I forgot my big thing. So we can reclaim our power. And this is the thing that I think is so important. We are never powerless, especially as women. We are incredibly powerful. And so much of reclaiming our power starts with understanding what we live with every month and feeling in awe and connected to it rather than at the mercy of what we are experiencing. So I'm going to move into now talking to you specifically about this map of womanhood, because the beautiful image here that I've shared on the screen, and it was also in the email, comes from an author, a writer called Gail Burkett, and she wrote many beautiful books, and Eartha Love references Gail often in her work and sort of acknowledges her as being someone who has informed so much of the way that she approaches this journey with the Map of Womanhood. And so yes, just also honoring her and her wisdom and her sharing with all of this. So you can see it here on the screen. There is this concept that within the spiral of womanhood, we have 9 thresholds. So kind of 9 significant moments that we all pass through. It's a universal female experience. And the way that it is described is that it is this holographic 3D spiral that brings us back to ourselves by helping us to see the bigger picture of our lives, bringing women to the deep understanding of the path through to the truth of their own true nature. So these thresholds, these beautiful moments that punctuate all of our lives, you know, the dates will vary for each of us, but there's this pivotal moment that I think is a very universal experience. So obviously birth, starting with birth on the outer side of the spiral, moving into middle childhood, which is around 8 to 11 years old, first blood or menarche, which obviously can vary dramatically from woman to woman, first flight, which is that moment when we really embark out into the world and start on our mission to live our own expression, womanhood bloom, which is the sort of era that I'm just edging out of now, that kind of 30s life era where you're birthing many things in the world, either a family, creative endeavors, a business, all sorts of things. Deepening womanhood, this is when we move into our menopause years. And then emerging from that, our elderhood. So elder, spiritual elder, and ultimately death. And as you move through, you see this beautiful spiral. And as you work with it as a concept, as a sort of, as a philosophy that you're going to live your life by, what's really beautiful is that you realize in each of these thresholds, as in nature, with each season that passes, there is an ending and a new beginning. And that, I think, is something that is so powerful and so beautiful for us all to be aware of, that kind of really that embodiment of how this too shall pass. So what I want to do is just take you on a little tour through these thresholds and just touch on some of the key aspects of it, just so that you have a flavour for it, and just to give you that perspective. And especially in this, you know, as we're recording this, we're in this incredible moment astrologically with this solar eclipse. And it's a really powerful time to kind of sit with ourselves and really be with ourselves and kind of honor everything that's gone through up until this point. So I'm really excited to be able to gift you this wisdom on this significant day. And yeah, I hope that you'll find that you can kind of connect in with a lot of what I share. So obviously the first threshold is birth, and how we arrive in, it's how we arrive in the world. And this threshold brings its own story for each of us, and those stories, whether we're conscious of them or not, are held in ourselves, and they are passed on through generations, like the story of how we came to be. And it's beautiful when we also consider the fact that at the moment when we're born as a woman, we are carrying all the eggs that we will ever release, meaning that at the moment just before giving birth, a woman is actually a vessel for 3 generations if she's carrying a daughter, because it's herself and her unborn child, and also all of the eggs inside that unborn child, or like the cell that will become all of those eggs. And so on this cellular level, we're so deeply connected with in that sort of generational line, and we can't underestimate the power of that connection. So it's a beautiful actually to go back and reflect and connect on the stories that surrounded our own birth, actually. And sometimes it can be difficult, but generally in my experience it can be really deeply healing, and it's a really powerful thing to go back and honor this rite of passage for ourselves and for our sisters and our communities, and actually to kind of work with birthing women as they cross this threshold now, because for so long, especially with the kind of medicalization of birth, the kind of sanctity and the sacredness of birth has been sort of lost. And it is this incredibly powerful threshold, not just for the babe arriving in the world, but also for the mother herself who is reborn in that moment. So it's a very, very powerful threshold and it's, again, this universal experience that we've all shared. And just kind of wanted to touch on each threshold. There's just a couple of oils that kind of came forward that felt to mention. And with this, I think what I love about working with the oils is that all of the oils work on a physical, an emotional, and on a spiritual level. And so when you're wanting to do some sort of deep inner work or channel information or kind of be in that place with yourself and hold space for yourself, actually what's incredible is that you can tap into the oils, and these are just what felt true and real for me. And if there were other oils that came forward for you, there's no right or wrong with it. But clary sage is the oil of euphoric birthing, and myrrh is known to be the oil of the mother. So if this was sort of an aspect of your, if this was something that you wanted to delve into, that might be 2 oils that you would like to start with and to journey with in order to connect with that threshold and that experience for yourself. I'm just going to have a little drink of water. And so then moving on to middle childhood, this kind of era of 8 to 11. My daughter's right slap bang in the middle at the moment, and it's a really incredible time for the young child, for the young woman, because she's actually at this threshold already in this space. She's kind of in a portal where she's not quite yet aware of becoming a woman, and she's just beginning to step towards that. So our hormones as women actually start to cycle from around the age of 8. That's when we first start to get that fluctuation in our hormones. So as women, we're driven by 3 main sex hormones, so estrogen, testosterone, and progesterone. And those 3 hormones start to ebb and flow from around the age of 8. And obviously it takes varying amounts of time, but it takes several years for them to come into any kind of natural rhythm, like kind of like a real kind of consistent rhythm. And once they've fully stabilized in their rhythm, that is when a girl would then start her first bleed. But in this middle childhood, the young girl can be quite she can already be quite in a cycle in the way of like expressing those different aspects, those different moods. But also it's still a time of real innocence. And they're often as children at that age, we're still really connected to kind of nature and magic and the whole kind of field of possibilities. So for many of us, I think inner child work is something that comes up a lot, especially for me, in my experience, lots of women around my age in that midlife era are looking back and wanting to kind of connect with their inner child. And this is certainly an aspect, where in this kind of middle childhood, so often we have all our hopes and dreams, and it's before they've kind of been limited by what the world thinks of those. And So it's a really beautiful part of ourselves to come home to. Some of the oils that came forward for this for me were for deep blue, for the kind of the idea of growing pains. Deep blue is the oil of surrender. So it's a really beautiful pain relief oil, but it's also like a very beautiful oil for the emotional pain that we may be going through. Some of us might have quite challenging memories of this time in our lives. But also for lavender, which is a really comforting, really soothing oil. It's known as the Swiss Army knife of essential oils because it does so many different things. But it's also like a throat chakra oil. It's a beautiful oil for being heard and being able to express ourselves. So this is like a very kind of, there's a lot of transformation that happens in every threshold, but I feel like especially like mothering a child in this phase at the moment, I can see that there's so much that shifts and moves through from that kind of 8 to 11 era. Very powerful threshold, this one. And then moving on, as those hormones start to regulate and find their kind of true rhythm, we will settle into menarche, our first blood. And this, I think, of all of the thresholds, menarche and menopause are the two that have really been aggressively negatively sold to us as women. I think, so many women don't receive any word of instruction. I think of my friend Rishna, who I work with, was doing some research before the Women's Health Summit, and there was a survey done in the UK where I think it was some staggering statistic, like 45% of girls hadn't actually had any education around periods before they experienced their first bleed. So it's been through a huge kind of oppressive phase, this first blood. And, I know from my experience growing up, it was very much just something that shouldn't be talked about, something that shouldn't be revered in any way, should be hidden as much as possible. But there's this beautiful book called Circle of Stones, and the author Judith Durek asks this question. She says, how might your life have been different if there had been a place for you to go to be with your mother, with your sisters and the aunts and your grandmothers and the great-great-grandmothers, a place of women to go home to be, to return to as women? How might your life have been different? And it's this idea that historically, ancestrally, our daughters would have been really held through this process of becoming when they were moving into their first blood. And it was really, over the past few generations, just completely wiped out this honoring and this reverence for the sacredness of this, because ultimately this is what gives us the potential to create life. And it's this incredible moment for us all that can be so celebrated. And yet, so for so many of us, that's just not the case. And there's a lot of shame around it and a lot of kind of heavy energy. And so, in the Map of Womanhood, this is actually kind of brought back into being as this incredibly powerful, beautiful, tender moment for the girl. And, and there's also a lot in it in the sense of, that kind of real, this is the loss of innocence. This is when the girl can no longer shy away from the fact that she will become a woman, she is becoming. And so, there can be a lot of gentleness that needs to be held at this time, and a lot of kind of push and pull that happens. And beautiful oils to work with for menarche would be ylang ylang, which is the oil of the inner child, but also grapefruit, which is the oil of honoring the body. I want to talk about working with oils for a minute, actually. So it's something that I say quite flippantly, and that I'm aware that not everybody really understands. So when I say about working with an oil, again, this is really personal to everyone. But if you're called, what you can do if you feel like you want to explore an oil more deeply, just committing to using that oil on a daily basis over the course of about 6 weeks, that is working with an oil. Whether it is having it in your diffuser or putting it in a roller ball and actually rolling it on and wearing it almost like a perfume, or maybe just if you have a meditation practice, you might just put a drop in the palm of your hands and breathe it in before you meditate. That is what I mean when I talk about working with an oil, because it's just developing a connection with it. And like I said, all of these oils have these different profiles. So there's lots of beautiful books. I've got, this is a little book about the emotions. And then we've got this bigger book you can see on my little tiny screen about the spiritual aspects of the oils. And if you're interested in finding where you can get those, speak to the person who connected you to the summit, because they'll be able to show you where to go and get those books. And it's so beautiful as we go on this journey through our lives as women, that we can lean into the support of these oils, of the beautiful natural products from doTERRA, to be able to work in all sorts of different ways, whether that's supporting ourselves emotionally, or if we want to go on a journey to do some sort of healing, or just for joy, and just for like wanting to have non-toxic, low tox products to enjoy in our life. So yes, in the Map of Womanhood, first blood is highly significant, and it also tends to sit kind of opposite menarche as well, in the way that so much of what begins with our first blood is then also kind of called into a sense of completion at our menopause as well. And some people sort of really feel that, you know, there's a lot that you can, if you can spend some time looking at how you experienced your first blood and how that kind of first year of your menstrual cycle was for you, that can give you a really good kind of guideline, a steer into, you know, how it might be for you moving into your menopausal years if you're not there yet. So lots of wisdom kept up in there. So the next, as we move through the spiral, so after this, the woman is blossoming, the young girl becomes the young woman and leaves home, her first flight. The young woman is sort of ripe with the fullness of life, and by this time she's fully cycling and she's ready to spread her wings and just soar. And it should be, you know, if we have held our daughters well, or if we have been held well, there's this beautiful opportunity at the flight, you know, at this leaving home, where it's really us like being ready and embracing adventure and stepping out and moving forwards. And tribally and ancestrally, there would have been a really big initiation ceremony at the point of menarche and at this kind of leaving home, you know, sending the youth away in a good way, so that they can go and live out their soul's mission. Actually, there's an incredible, like, there's this sort of indigenous saying, I can't remember exactly how they say it, but it says like how you have to make sure that you send the youth off well into the world, otherwise they'll come back and burn the village down. So it's like this idea that if we don't set them up with the tools when we send them out into the world, ultimately, you know, it's not going to end well for any of us. And if you were wanting to kind of look at this era in your life, you might want to look with some oils like cardamom, which is the oil of objectivity, or you could work with wild orange abundance. It can be really interesting for us as women to spend time, and I'm going to talk to you at the end of this about the beautiful work that Eartha Love does, because she does have programs where you can actually work through all these thresholds. She gives you very much tools for self-healing, to take yourself through it, because actually there's so much healing that can happen just from sitting with all of the ways that we weren't held as we went through the map, as we went through the spiral of womanhood, and revisiting those thresholds and giving ourselves the love and compassion and the witnessing that maybe we lacked when we were going through it ourselves in real time. So moving out from there, we come into the era I suppose for most women, it's like in the 30s, in your 30s, the womanhood bloom. So this is, for some women, it's basically a time when we're in our like kind of creative element. We're birthing many things into the world, and it could be a family, but it's not by no means limited to that, because it could be birthing a creative vision, it could be birthing a business, it could be, for some women, this is the sort of time when they create themselves again outside of the confines of what they grew up sort of thinking that they should be. You know, you go through your 20s and you break free from your family home, and maybe even your family town or village where you grew up, and you kind of go away. Some people will move to the other side of the world at this point, you know, and really almost like birthing ourselves again, in many, many ways, and growing sort of inwardly and outwardly to bring our visions into the world. So this can be a very powerful, very rich, very full time. It's also sometimes known as like spinning woman, because it's like the idea we're just like spinning all our plates, and kind of bringing all of this energy into the world. And this was actually, funnily enough, this was the one threshold that I struggled to, I was really overthinking which oils, and it was actually Rishna who helped me channel which oils would be a beautiful match for this. So we kind of rested on geranium, so love and trust, bringing in that kind of love and trust and belief in ourselves. And then also bergamot, the oil of self-acceptance, could be two beautiful oils either to work with if you're kind of looking back and healing in this time, or if you're kind of in this moment now in your life, these could be beautiful oils for you to partner with to really embrace and embody this time. And then it comes into the deepening woman. So this is the menopausal years. And I think, again, this is something that has been so drilled into us as being this terrible time. And I'm very aware of the fact that I'm speaking on this as a woman who has not gone through menopause yet. So I know that that will change, my opinion and my experience of this will change as I live it myself. But I do feel that this can be such an incredible threshold for women if we could only, have the space and the time to go through the process, not being pushed through in this kind of ever quickening pace of this like linear productivity driven world. Actually, we're crossing into our wisdom years, and it is a huge invitation to live our fullest purpose. And when we're kind of conditioned to keep going and to push through all the time, it can feel, I think there's a lot of resistance around the fact that we actually do need to just slow down. Our body slows down and changes, and we need to slow down as well and kind of cross this threshold. And we are experiencing all these different aspects of ourselves as well. So I think, especially for those of us like myself who were at the age of 14 put onto birth control, this was really standard for my generation. I was on birth control for 16 years, not because I needed contraceptive, but actually just because I had terrible problems with my menstrual cycle. And so, I think for so many women, that's the experience. And then we're only kind of coming off birth control when we're coming into our menopausal years. And of course, then we're having to meet all these different parts of ourselves that have been suppressed by a contraceptive pill. And obviously, as we go through the menopause, all of those parts of ourselves are like amplified and louder. And it brings up a lot, but it's in a way, it is a positive thing, because the idea is that it is this opportunity for us to clear the path and really be in our full expression of who we are and what we want to be in the world. We've got a whole session coming for you on the menopause in week 3, held by my dear friend Rushna, and it's going to be a very, very powerful, very beautiful session. Rushna's really, really well versed in all of this work, and it's going to be incredible. So yes, an amazing time in a woman's life, and not easy. So the oils that came forward for this was copaiba, which is the oil of unveiling, and vetiver, which is I put cantering. Oh dear, that's a typo on my slides. It's centering and descent, not cantering. Although maybe some women do want to sort of run away at that point. Maybe that's what that is. But yeah, it's this time in our lives that has been so demonized and vilified, and actually, society is so scared of the wild woman, and we're so, conditioned to be the good girl. And I think that can be, one of the hardest aspects from what I know, and from the people that I work with, and my friends who are going through it, that kind of wildness that wants to come forward, and the needing to hold it all in. So yeah, it's beautiful. Amanda says in the chat she loves being a wild woman. Good, we need more. So I plan to be one. Beautiful. So moving through, and I'm just really aware that I'm sort of sharing lots and lots of information here, but I think it's so incredible to look at this spiral in its fullness, and then know that we're going to be touching on so many different aspects of this throughout the course of the next 3 weeks. So, the elderhood is something that we not everybody gets there. And so it's this very, very rich, sacred time in our lives if we're blessed enough to live to that full expression of ourselves in these later years, in the sort of autumn of our lives. And sadly, though, we are living in a time where there are very few kind of healed elders to turn to. When we look at the elders of society, the people who run the governments and the big corporations, you would hope for them to be these wise people, these healed wisdom keepers, and it's sadly not the case. So much of, I mean, when I look at the politicians, I feel like it's watching sort of schoolyard playing, I don't know, playing at something, rather than this kind of wiser elder population that we should be turning to for wisdom and guidance. And it's really beautiful to work with the Map of Womanhood and use it as this invitation to walk with real intention towards our destiny, to be those healed elders, and to take on that mantle and that responsibility for holding the wisdom and sharing that with future generations. The phase of life in the elderhood, it's really oriented around gifting our deep understanding that we hopefully will have cultivated through living our life with awareness and, through self-inquiry, and having gone through with awareness those thresholds, or if we haven't been held in those thresholds, to revisit them ourselves and do that healing work to understand that process of our life more deeply and be able to share from that wisdom. And it's really a time when we start to fulfill our spiritual purpose in the world, having been through our purpose with ourselves in our early years, defining ourselves, becoming ourselves, leaving the home, to then becoming, part of the community, having our families, or, birthing our businesses and creations into the world. And then as you move into the elderhood, it's really actually like more of the spiritual purpose. So like the self, the material, the spiritual. Beautiful oils for this phase of life would be black pepper, which is the oil of unmasking, and Roman chamomile, which is the oil of spiritual purpose. And one thing I love about Roman chamomile, it's known as the garden's physician. So when Roman chamomile grows in the garden, it benefits the health of all the other plants there. And I really feel like that's, what we would want in our elders, right? To have that kind of, that, to be enriching the lives of those around them, and to be able to pass that wisdom down. That's obviously something that we would all be striving for. And the spiritual elder is really the twilight years. It's an incredibly potent time where the veil becomes very, very thin between the realms, I feel. And sadly, because of the way that our lifespans are increasing and our health spans are decreasing, many people in this threshold are actually, we become institutionalized. We're not able to live at home, but it is an incredibly tender, beautiful time. And it's actually amazing to spend time with people in their sort of spiritual elderhood who have lived through so much, and the way that they perceive the world in that time, that stillness and that capacity for understanding, can be quite humbling and incredible to sit with. Beautiful oils to work with in this era of life could be juniper berry, which is the oil of the night, or Douglas fir, which is an oil of generational wisdom. If you want to kind of connect in with those aspects, or maybe, work with someone in your family or in your community as well. And then coming all the way around now back to the center, and coming to death, this beautiful central piece of the Map of Womanhood. And I think one of the most potent things that I found from working with the Map of Womanhood over the past 4 years, and being guided in that by Eartha, is that realization. Eartha really encourages us to make an altar for the Map of Womanhood, and to craft or find in nature objects that represent each of those thresholds for us. I actually did sit with my daughter once, and we made little clay objects to make our own altar for the Map of Womanhood. And I think what has been the most profound thing for me in that journey is realizing, we are in this spiral of life and death every month in our menstrual cycle. Women go through that. When we're bleeding, we are in that life-death cycle. And we're having to let everything fall away every month, just like the trees do every winter. And then we come through the other side and everything grows again, just like nature does every year, year on year. And yet, when we're living in our lives and we're just pushing ahead with things in the way that we do, we can feel that there are so many endings and not think about the beginning that comes on the other side of that. And I really feel, one of the greatest gifts of working with this wisdom is understanding that with every ending there is always a new beginning, even if we can't see it. And so death is at the center of the map. It's a spiral that is forever orbiting it, wherever wherever we are on the map of womanhood, we're always spiraling in. And there's times in our life actually when we're in crisis where we might feel like we're actually just pulled right into the middle of that map, only to come back out of it again and meet ourselves back in our lives again. And yeah, I feel that when we can come into communion with these thresholds, we can actually just really cultivate so much compassion and understanding, and ultimately, it brings us to a place where we can be in a much deeper acceptance of those final thresholds that can be so confronting. They're so unspoken in our society. Actually, Emily, who is my mentor in doTERRA, many of you all know Emily. She's hosting an incredible program at the moment with someone about sort of tending to the dying, and it is this very hidden, very kind of taboo subject in our society, and yet it is the one certainty for all of us. So it's a beautiful process to go through, coming to a familiarity and not being afraid of it and not turning away from it, and actually knowing that it sits at the center of our whole experience, and just learning to embrace that. And beautiful, beautiful oils for this threshold could be frankincense, which is truth and consciousness. And interestingly, what came forward for me was patchouli, which is the oil of physicality, which may seem at odds with it. Thank you, Elsie. Yeah, no problem. It's an incredible threshold, and a beautiful kind of, when we start to try and work with it within the map, I think it can be much softer and much less scary than maybe we thought. So I can't give you the full spectrum, the full depth and meaning of each of those thresholds in such a short call. But what I hope is that, having just had that overview, that you could sort of start to feel a connection to some of those moments and those thresholds that you've lived through in your own life. And I think that when we come into the map of womanhood with awareness and start to kind of notice it and acknowledge it in our own life, it really brings us into a deeper acceptance and trust in our own cyclical nature, something which societally and culturally we've been so conditioned out of. And I think that is also one of the things that I love about working with the oils, is how it's a constant invitation to come back into our bodies and back into our intuition and our parasympathetic nervous system. And I think, especially for us, like if those of us who kind of are around the younger generation of women, it's incredible to sort of cultivate our own meaningful self-care practices and share that with the next generation of women, and just bring this wisdom towards the younger generation. And I don't think you have to be a mother to do that, because we all have younger women in our communities in some spaces, whether that's in your work or in your neighborhood or whatever it might be for you. I think it's just so powerful for all of us to reconnect with this wisdom and kind of bring it closer to the future generations as well. So I'm going to start to wrap it up and just give you a couple of invitations to go deeper. There's quite a lot of text on this slide, but I'm going to read it to you. So this was shared in some of the work that I did with Eartha. And it's given as a message from the Indigenous grandmothers. And so I'm just going to read it. Right, I'm not going to try and paraphrase it. So it says, the map of womanhood is a holographic 3D spiral that brings us back to ourselves by helping us to see the bigger picture of our lives, so we can go through the veils of separation into the connectedness of all life. It brings women the deep understanding of the path to the truth of their own true nature, finding ourselves by giving ourselves the picture of our own journey traveling this road. The road is ancient, well-traveled, and holds much knowledge about which way you must go, which path you seek, and which way the river of your own life is taking you. Walk this ancient red path with beauty and grace as the spirits walk beside you. The grandmothers walk beside you, urging you to complete your earth walk with the beauty of the path of woman. Have strength, honor, and compassion for the right and wrong turns that we take to get there, honoring the cycle and finding your way back to the path in every moment. It becomes a map as you become more conscious on this journey, letting go of the past, but bringing the vibrant and rich threads of your medicine with you so you can find your way forward consciously. The golden thread of light that wove its way through your past thresholds becomes a light to help you find your way through the future thresholds you've yet to walk. You can become conscious on your path. And actually, what I might do is I can send this slide, I can email it out to you after the call, because it's such an incredible piece of writing and such an amazing concept for us to embody that can just bring us home to ourselves so much. And so I'm just gonna, before I wrap it up completely and stop the recording, I've just got some resources here on the screen. So some of the books that Arthur recommended to me, and that therefore I'm going to pass on and recommend to you. It's been such a gift to be mentored by her. So you'll see several there from Gail Burkett, but also some others on there as well. And there is a QR code on the screen, and the recording will be sent out for this as well, so you can catch it later if you want to, and that takes you through to Eartha's website, so that you could connect with her, because she does offer mentoring and all sorts of other incredible wisdom and guidance. Within all of that, we've also got gorgeous Nisha here on our call and in our team, who also works with Eartha and shares lots of information. So if you're not getting everything you need from what we've shared here, you can always come back to me and I can connect you in with more. And just to wrap it up, actually, so yeah, I've got this slide about why these oils. So I was going to talk briefly just about doTERRA and why in particular we sort of recommend working with doTERRA oils if you're going to be going on a healing journey with any of this, just because the doTERRA oils are so incredibly pure and they are completely unadulterated, which is so significant, because most other oils that you work with will not be pure, and therefore you're not going to get the same beautiful healing benefits and that connection if you're going to go on that spiritual kind of healing journey and want to work in that way. And it means, when you work with doTERRA oils, you're going to have just the most beautiful pure plant allies to help you on that journey of healing. And for anyone who is watching this and doesn't currently have a doTERRA account, not yet connected, there's a couple of kits here on the screen that we would recommend as beautiful tools for this journey on this Map of Womanhood. So either the Daily Habits kit with some Metapower oil, it's a beautiful kind of regime of supplements and gut health products, as well as some oils, or the Home Essentials kit. Just wanted to give you an illustration of like a couple of the ways that you might want to come in and start your journey if you're not yet connected to oils, but you want to bring in some of this kind of incredible healing support from the oils into your journey as you go, either throughout the Map of Womanhood, or if you're going to deep dive into any other topics from the Women's Health Summit. So just a note on those as well. And to wrap it up, I will just share that our next seminar is on Thursday at 7 p.m. with wonderful Nisha and another one of our leaders, Becky Bowles, and we are going to be diving into supporting the menstrual cycle. So everything from that first blood right the way through to menopause, when we're in our menstrual cycling years, we'll be giving you all the wisdom that we have to share on how you can support yourself with oils and products from doTERRA in that next seminar. So I hope that this has unlocked something to you. I really hope, especially the fact that we're sort of right now in the midst of the eclipse portal, that this has brought some potent wisdom and some powerful kind of, just maybe shone a light onto something that you needed to hear. And I am going to stop the recording. I will send the recording out to everyone who's registered, and also it's going to be uploaded into the My Event Cafe space over the next day or so as well. And now I'm going to just say a big thank you to everyone who was here on the live. I'm going to stop the recording and I'll be able to answer any questions.